The Supreme Court has stepped in with a temporary fix to a law that took effect this week, impacting Mississippi's child protection system. The change in law keeps state agencies from disclosing records involving children without exceptions. It created concern that the law would impact the Department of Child Protection Services and the courts that oversee cases of abused or neglected youth. The department filed an emergency motion Tuesday. The High Court's order, that is, provides a temporary fix and suspends penalties for violating confidentiality. The order will remain in place until July 24th.